The 14th of December. My name is Councillor Paul Baker. I'm Chairman of the committee. This meeting is being streamed live to Cheltenham Borough Council's YouTube channel, and the recording of the meeting will be held for 4 years. If there are any breaks in transmission to the YouTube stream, the meeting will be... Where am I now? The meeting will be adjourned for a short period until any issues are resolved. To the public present, if you are here to make a representation to the meeting, you are consenting to the use of the sound and video recordings for broadcasting and training purposes. Please be aware that CCTV and audio recording is now in operation in the public gallery, and the recordings will be held by the Council for 5 months. Please note, a fire alarm test is not expected, so if the alarm does sound, you should immediately make your way to the nearest exit. Okay, thank you. I just want to make a quick statement. First of all, there's been some, what I would say, scurrilous correspondence going around suggesting that one of our planning officers is also working for one of the applicants in one of the applications that we've been considering recently. I would like to say it is entirely scurrilous and there's absolutely no truth in it at all. It just so happens that someone of the same name works in the private sector. And I dare say there's a Paul Baker who works in the private sector somewhere. You know, it's one of those things. But it's unfortunate that someone has drawn wrong conclusions to that, casting aspirations which are clearly incorrect. Okay, so agenda item 456 High Street has been withdrawn. Hopefully there's nobody here for that particular item. Agenda item 1 is apologies, and we have apologies from Councillor Barbara Clark. Nobody else, Claire? No. Okay. Thank you. And item 2 is declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest, members? No. Lovely. Thank you. Declarations of independent site visits. Any members like to? Councillor Fisher?
I looked in on Runnings Road this afternoon.
Thank you. And a member of the committee did go on Planning View and looked at the applications as well. Right, agenda item 4 is minutes of the last meeting. Members happy that I can sign those as a correct record? Thank you very much. Lovely. Agenda item 5, public questions. There are none. Which brings us on to agenda item 6, which is Oakley Farm. Now, this item is proposed to be deferred for reasons that will be explained by the planning officer and the highways officer. So shall I hand over to you first, Lucy?
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully members will have had time to read through the update report and digest it as far as possible. It's unfortunate that we've had to defer the item at such a late stage, but it's all come about because planning officers sought clarification from the applicant that the gradients, the road gradients proposed did actually conform with condition 13. The submission details were somewhat lacking in that area, and in so doing I also consulted the Highway Authority to confirm that road gradient satisfied condition 13, and they reviewed both the proposals and the wording of condition 13 and concluded that actually they don't. If I read through condition 13, so you're absolutely clear as to how it's worded, and condition 13 relates entirely to reserved matters details, which is the problem that we have. So the second part of condition 13 reads as follows. The access should be installed in accordance with the approved details and made available for use prior to first occupation of any dwelling. The reserved matters submissions relating to access are required to be generally designed so that maximum and minimum gradients allowable will be 1 in 20 and 1 in 100 respectively, save that gradients up to 1 in 12 are permissible, provided that where they are proposed, they shall be limited to maximum lengths of 30 metres. So it's the up to that is now the critical point. There are no 1 in 12 gradients that exceed the 30-metre lengths, but there are sections between 1 in 20 and 1 in 12 where that 30 length permissible allowance is exceeded. The Highway Authority has been in discussions this week with the applicant as to how they can resolve the situation, and you will have seen that there's a couple of options potentially available to either raise ground levels in the lower parts of the site at the bottom end, northern end, or to cut deeper into the upper slopes at the southern end of the site. Now, obviously, this has just arrived. Officers haven't had time to consider the impacts of those two options, and I must say at this stage we're not supportive of those options because of the potential impacts on the landscape. Another option would be to go through the Section 73 route, so a material amendment, rewording of Condition 13, and more or less stick with the same proposed layout and road gradient, subject to the Highway Authority being satisfied with that. So obviously there needs to be a lot of discussion and potentially another application process, and then we bring the application back to committee with an approved varied condition and either a revised scheme or the same scheme and for reserve matters, and then go from there. So I'll pass over to Nathan from the Highway Authority, who might explain that better than I did. Thank you.
Hi everyone.
Thank you.
I don't have a name tag. My name's Nathan Drover. I'm the Highways Development Manager. Chair, if it's okay, before I dive into gradients, I know there's a lot of public representations about some of the road impacts. So I just wanted to touch on the background to how the road impact was dealt with and then deal with the gradient issue, if that's okay. So some of the councillors may recall the County Council objected to the outline planning application. Primarily on road impacts on the local road network. That was Priors Road, Hewlett Road, Harp Hill, double mini roundabout, the A40 junction to the south, Priors Road and Red Marley Road at the Sainsbury's signals. And we argued at the public inquiry that those routes there would be a severe impact on those routes. And it would increase journey times, it would impact on public transport, there would be running on different routes, and there would be blocking back to the adjacent junctions. Now, the inspector didn't agree with us on that point, and they concluded that the traffic impact had been overestimated, and the severe impact, I better explain severe impact, the National Planning Policy Framework says development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe. And I think this is why quite often, because the bar is so high to refuse development, we quite often criticise for not doing it. And in this case, we did do it, and the inspector didn't agree with us. So they they concluded that this severe impact hadn't been proven. And the other issue we were there representing were the gradients. We were concerned about the steepness of the site and whether any developer who took it on would be able to make it acceptable for wheelchair users. So there's a new publication called Inclusive Mobility. I think it was published about 2 years ago, and it postdates the County Council's own guidance, which is the Manual for Gloucestershire Streets, and it does tighten up on gradients to deal with things such as the Equalities Act and equal access for all. The proposed gradients, the applicant's proposed gradients came in as part of the reserve matters, and the County Council have accepted them. So the County Council agreed that they were okay for adoption purposes. They complied with the Manual for Gloucestershire Streets, which the subtle difference, Chair, is the Manual for Gloucestershire Streets allows gradients at 1 in 12 for 30 metres, and it sounds exactly the same as the planning condition, but Lucy's pointed out the point that the difference is the phrase up to, and I'll just come on to that and try and explain it in a little bit more detail. So we had accepted the the 1 in 12, the lengths of 1 in 12 didn't exceed 30 metres. But what the condition says is the design, the maximum gradients allowable will be 1 in 20, save that gradients, I can't really do a good up to, emphasise up to, gradients up to 1 in 12 are permissible. So what that means is those gradients up to 1 in 12, that means from 1 in 20, so 1 in 19, 1 in 18, 1 in 17, 1 in 16, 1 in 15, 1 in 14, 1 in 13, all those other gradients can't exceed 30 metres as well. So that's the difference between our normal interpretation of our guidance. So we checked it against the standard 30 metres at 1 in 12 and accepted it. But we have confirmed to Cheltenham planners that it, in our opinion, it doesn't technically apply with the wording of the condition. So there are a number of what's called vertical curves. So the gradients run at 30 metres at 1 in 12, and then there's a curve, a vertical hog curve and a sag curve, and then another 30 metres. And those curves combined are 40 metres in length, and they would fall into the category up to 1 in 12, and they shouldn't exceed 30 metres, and they do. So that's why it doesn't comply with the condition. So, nevertheless, the objective of the condition is to ensure that gradients have been optimised to provide the best circumstances for wheelchair users. So we have been working with Vistry to see whether they've done everything that's reasonably practicable to achieve the gradients, and whether they can be modified to actually meet the exact wording of the condition, i.e. the gradients that are between 1 in 12 and 1 in 20 aren't greater than 30 metres. So we've received a submission today which considers two scenarios. So the councillors will know the site, that basically if you can drop the top end of the site, the high end of Harp Hill, or you can lift the bottom end of the site, or you could do combinations of the two. I know it's a civil engineering insight there, but lowering the upper section of the road has a number of impacts, and I'll just summarise them. It reduces the level through the public open space to the south of the site along Harp Hill, and that will require the road to go through that public open space in more of a cutting. So it will probably reduce the road height, the road level by about 2.2 metres. So there'll be more of an impact on the character of that bit of open space. It reduces the level of one of the connecting roads as it goes further into the site, which will impact on one of the retained hedgerows that goes through the site. Not a large impact, but there'll be more loss of that hedgerow. And it will cut through a Southern Trent water main, so it would have to be diverted. And there would be a significantly higher level of exportation to get rid of that material from the top of the site. Turning to the bottom of the site, so the other, raising the bottom end of the site, that would raise the low spot by at least 3 metres above the current proposed level of the road. So that would adversely impact one of the protected oak tree by raising the levels around the oak tree. It would require additional retaining structures, particularly around the residential properties, and some of the back gardens of the residential properties would slope away quite steeply because we would have picked the road up. And it would that would require a significant importation of soil. So lift the bottom, drop the top, and there's obviously a middle ground, if you excuse the pun, of combining the two. And we haven't got that far yet, we've just got the two options. So that's as far as we've got. It sort of moves into planning balance then, because the County Council have already accepted that Vistry can do it in accordance with the Manual for Gloucester Street Standards. But what we hadn't done is said, oh, by the way, it doesn't actually comply exactly with the wording of the condition. I think that's all I've got to cover, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you both for the explanation, and obviously it is quite significant, and I think so the sensible thing would be to defer it so this can be resolved. Before I move to deferral, does anybody have any questions to ask the officers? Okay, so a move is to defer. All those in favour? Thank you. None against? No abstentions? That's unanimous. Lovely, thank you very much. Okay, so next item 456 High Street is withdrawn for now, hopefully back in January. Next one is 6C, which is Priory Street. And Ben, you're going to introduce the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Technical fault.
Yeah.
Okay, so this application relates to 16 Priory Street, a Grade 2 listed building located within Cheltenham Central Conservation Area. Planning permission and listed building consent is being sought for the rebuilding of the boundary walls located to the rear of the site. The application is at Planning Committee as Cheltenham Borough Homes are the applicant and Cheltenham Borough Council are the landowner. I've put together a few slides, so an aerial view there. On the plan on the left, the red box is the existing building. The purple lines are the walls that are the subject of the application. So 3 walls across each boundary. There's a closer one there. Some photos of the existing walls. So it's like existing and proposed. So all walls are to be replaced in the same position to the same height. So the key planning matters are the impact on the designated heritage assets and the impact on neighbouring amenity. The Conservation Officer raises no objection to the work subject to conditions, and the works are also considered to be acceptable in terms of impact on amenity as set out in the report. The recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to conditions. These include the normal time and approved plans conditions, the submission of a tree method statement, because there's a tree in the neighbour's garden which is close by. And then with regards to the wall itself and requirements from conservation is that the bricks and the coping stones and the bonding pattern should match existing, and that then the mortar to be used should be lime mortar. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ben. Any questions, members? Councillor Fisher, thank you.
Just one. It says there, bricks, coping stones and bonding to match the existing. They are available because obviously these, you know, we go by bricks now, they all come metric, and before that they were different sizes going back different times, and it on behalf of the applicant, it can be very expensive to buy heritage bricks, handmade things, and there's a lot of bricks in those walls.
Yes, so the actual, what they're proposing is to reuse all existing bricks. That is set out in their statement and also is in the description. So to deconstruct the walls, retain, clean up existing bricks and stones and rebuild. The condition is necessary and says any new bricks. So it's to if there is, inevitably there might be a few damaged. So it's basically suggesting that if any new are needed, that they would need to match what's there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Any... Oh, sorry, Simon. Councillor Wheeler.
No, it was just a curiosity, because I know this does come up. What is the reason for the lime mortar? Obviously, it was the original mortar, but what is the argument behind insisting on it is lime mortar as opposed to common cement mortar?
I don't know. Obviously, it's a historic wall, and historically they would have used lime mortar. It was a requirement of the Conservation Officer. I don't know the reasoning behind it, ultimately, to give the same design and appearance as a historic wall. The intention is to rebuild it to make it look as though it's historic again. Somebody else might have more knowledge, but I don't.
Lime mortar repels water better, and its colour. It's very good bonding, but it repels water where you've got like weeds that would grow in the wall or ivy, because that in normal mortar, ivy would suck all the moisture out in next to no time.
I've always said that planning meetings are a learning curve. Thank you very much. Councillor Oliver.
Thanks, Chair. There was a comment from the neighbour regarding they objected that the trellis work wasn't being replaced. Is there any reason why it can't be?
No, I think that's just a decision between the landowners, ultimately. From our point of view, they're proposing a new wall. That is acceptable. There is no need for an additional trellis. They've highlighted concerns about privacy, but the wall itself is 1.9, which is higher than what we would require for a screen if it was new, for example. So, yeah, it's just a choice. It doesn't mean to say that the neighbour couldn't install their own, subject to any consents that they might need.
Okay, any debate? recommend. Oh, Councillor Andrews.
Yes, apologies for this, but I'm just making a late declaration of interest here on a non-executive director on Cheltenham Borough Home, so I'll be abstaining in the vote.
I'm not sure you need to, but that's fine. So recommendation is permit. Those in favour, please show. I think that's unanimous with one abstention. Lovely, thank you. Okay, we now go to item 6D, which is Unit 3, Runnings Road, and Ben's going to introduce this on behalf of Victoria. Thank you. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. The application type relates to an area of grass verge located along Runnings Road within an existing industrial estate. Advertisement consent is being sought for the repositioning and retention of 2 freestanding signs with new advertisements. The sign relates to an industrial unit, which is Unit 5, which is the rear of another building that fronts onto Runnings Road. The application is at Planning Committee at the request of Councillor Fisher. So we've got an aerial view there of where it is. So the photos here, so that is of the existing sign, so the one with the white background and the to let, that is the existing sign. So it's broadly going to be that same sign, but moved further back, and it will actually be behind the mesh fence that you can't actually see on this photo, but if I go on to the next slide, you'll be able to see roughly how far it needs to move. So it's being pushed back, and obviously we'll have new detailing on the actual adverts themselves. That's the new sign. Okay, so the key planning matters for an advertisement application are amenity and public safety. For the reasons discussed in the report, the signs are considered to be of an acceptable scale and design for their location within the industrial estate and is not considered to adversely affect visual amenities. From a safety perspective, Gloucester Highways raised no objection. The recommendation is to grant consent subject to standard conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ben. Any questions? Debate? Anybody want to speak? Councillor Fisher?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I asked for this to come because I've had a letter from the owner of a unit, not a tenant, and it says in the conditions no advertisements to be displayed without the permission of the owner of the site. Now, part of that sign currently is on Highways land, and we acknowledge that as a planning authority. I spoke to the officer. It's not the officer who's brought it tonight, but she admits that is on Highways land. And the land that it would sit on is under an electricity pylon. And I've asked property to see if they can find out who owns it. And short of going to the land registry and paying a fee, they can't. There is no... and I just wonder whether we're wasting our flaming time, really, because without the landowner's permission, and the other thing is the access, other than climbing the fence, is over the person who has objected his land, not his premises that he is a tenant of. He owns the premises, and he has objected, and he said, if necessary, I'll put the fence up. But there's also a highway thing, because you've literally got about half a metre between the post and the edge of the curb on that side of the road where it is on the highways land. But if you move it back, I don't know how you get in to do anything to it, because you wouldn't have access to the land. I assume, and I'm always wary of assuming anything, because it generally proves you wrong, that the land is owned by the National Grid. But as far as I can tell, they have not been asked or given permission to erect signs under pylons. It's it's a very small thing, but, and also the landowner immediately that provides the access certainly won't provide permission. One of the adverts on there is for a place in Mead Road in Leckhampton, actually, so it's not going to direct you to the right unit. The other one, it might, but, you know, it seems ridiculous. And at the moment, under the law, as I understand it, Alder King have put up an advert on it for so many days which you are allowed without planning permission to advertise the letting of a premises. So, you know, and I know that advertising boards for estate agents, political parties come under a different thing because, you know, I've put up hundreds around Cheltenham, but that is in a limited time and doesn't need planning permission. But also in the original document, they say they have consulted the landowners and things like that. But that's not true. And because when I spoke to the officer and said, it's on highways land, she said, oh, is it? And I said, yep, it is. And they haven't been consulted. So I assume if it is National Grid, they haven't been consulted anyhow.
Thank you. I'm not sure any of that is a planning issue, but I'll let the officers come back. Are there any other questions before I come back to the officers? Ben, do you have any observations? We've obviously had no objections from anybody to the application.
I think you captured it, Chair, that the matters that Councillor Fisher is raising are not material planning considerations. It comes down to land ownership. The application is seeking consent for the advertisement consent. It doesn't give consent for somebody to put something on land that they don't have control on. So ultimately, the consent could be null and void if the landowner, whoever that may be, doesn't actually give them consent. So we're only considering whether the merits of the application of the adverts are acceptable. The issues about ownership have been raised with the applicant, and it's addressed in the report what their response was. There's been a change in hands of which unit they occupy. The previous occupier put the sign up. The new, when moving, so the sign was originally put up by the tenants of Unit 3. When they left, the applicant, this current applicant, bought the existing sign from the landlord and now seeks consent to retain and move it. That's a snapshot of the response that we got from the applicant. Now, we can only go by what they provide us, but ultimately the issues are not planning matters.
Thank you. Right, anybody want to speak?
Can I come back, please, Chair?
I'm just asking if anyone wants to speak on the item. No? Councillor Fisher?
Thank you.
Is this going to be on a planning matter?
Oh, yes. In the conditions and informatives on the report, it said, reasons for avoidance of doubt in the interest of proper planning. So I take this as a planning matter. No advertisement is to be displayed without the owner of the site or any other person interested in the site to grant permission. No advertisement will be cited and displayed so that it endangers person using the highway, which this one currently does, railway, waterway, dock, harbour, aerodrome. None of those apply. Obscure or hinder interpretation of any traffic signs, railway site, doesn't apply there, but hinder operation of any device or purpose of security or surveillance. There are signs on the pylon, danger of death, high voltage. It is underneath it. So I think there is a planning reason given in our conditions and informatives, Chair.
I'll just ask the legal officer to comment.
Yeah, so I understand what you're saying, but from a legal perspective, in terms of advertisement consents and planning consents, it'll be up to the applicant to then go away and get that formal legal authority from the landowner to put that sign there. So we can grant them consent if we think it's appropriate from a planning perspective to put the sign there, but they then must go away and get any necessary legal agreements from either the National Grid. Sometimes they may need a licence from the Highways Authority if it's on highways land, and they may need to enter into a legal agreement with the landowner in order to put it there. But those matters are not relevant to the determination of the application for the advertisement consent tonight. It's a private matter that they have to sort out privately between themselves and the landowners.
I understand that it's civil law, and therefore, but
We've had the response of the planning officer. She's clearly set out the situation. The recommendation is to permit. I'm going to move to the vote. So all those in favour of permit, please show. Thank you. Those against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, so we now move on to item 6E, which is Grosvenor House. And again, I'll ask Ben to introduce this on behalf of Victoria. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. So the application site relates to Grosvenor Terrace, which is a terrace of buildings consisting of 24 residential apartments. The site is located within the Central Conservation Area, and a number of listed buildings are in close proximity of the site. Planning permission is being sought for the replacement of all windows and doors in the rear elevation with new UPVC windows and doors. The application is at Planning Committee at the request of Councillor Took. So the frontage of the application site fronts onto Evesham Road with a rear access lane to the rear. It's a photo of the rear elevation from Google Earth. An actual photo of the rear elevation. An existing rear elevation photo. We have the proposed window and door details. They're proposed to be legacy-style UPVC, double-glazed sliding sash windows with Georgian glazing bars, and the doors UPVC double-glazed with glazing bars as well. So the key planning matters are design, impact on amenity, and impact on designated heritage assets, as well as sustainability and public benefits. The Council's Conservation Officer considers the replacement windows and doors would detract from the appearance of the building and be harmful to the character of the conservation area, the level of harm being less than substantial. This harm is not considered to be outweighed by public benefits. As such, offer recommendation is to refuse the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'd like to call Councillor Took to speak. You have up to 5 minutes. Thank you.
It's working now, good. Grosvenor House is not a listed building or a building of special architectural interest. Grosvenor House is not even an old building. It was built in 2005. In close proximity to Grosvenor House on the Evesham Road, there are a variety of 20th century buildings, such as Anlaby Court, with a variety of window frames, also within the conservation area. The proposed changes to the highly visible changes are not to the highly visible front facade of the building, but rather to the back of the building, where there is a bin storage area accessed by a dead-end service road used by residents and not the public, and where there are very few people, cars passing through. The proposed double-glazed windows at the back of the building would face onto other double-glazed windows and doors in listed buildings opposite. No one has objected from any of those buildings, and Grosvenor House's double-glazed doors have been visible for 18 years without complaint. This building has always incorporated double glazing. The committee should be aware that the patio and Juliet balcony doors on the rear elevation were installed in 2005 as double-glazed units as part of the original build and passed by building control. There is precedence for the use of double glazing in this building that goes right back to the original build itself. The proposed new double glazing uses heritage-style windows which are designed to fit in. Since this building has been built, the facts surrounding this building have changed substantively. We have a cost of living crisis where the price of heating has gone through the roof, and we have a duty as councillors to be mindful of this significant financial pressure on residents. We have an opportunity to help 24 households to reduce their bills significantly. We also have a climate crisis, and becoming net zero by 2030 is a key objective for Cheltenham Borough Council. In this context, a major report by the National Housing Federation stated that The average family or household is currently producing more CO2 every year by living in their home than by driving. By accepting this application to install double glazing, you will have a chance to reduce significantly the carbon impacts of 24 households. The window frames are rotting now, so if this application is approved, it is highly likely that the changes will be made in 2024. Cheltenham Borough Council's Excellent Climate Change SPD of June 2022 states under the heading of retrofitting historic buildings that changes to the historic environment can be managed and a balance found that meets objectives for both conservation and climate change. Grosvenor House is not even an historic building, and the windows are not visible to the general public. If we cannot find the right balance for this building, I'm pessimistic that we will reach the right compromises to protect heritage and protect the planet in the context of our old or listed buildings. I urge you to apply common sense and accept this application.
Thank you, Councillor Tuke. Gary, I believe you're speaking to on behalf of the applicant. You have up to 5 minutes as well.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to speak on behalf of the applicants. As the committee will be aware, in 2019, the Council declared a climate emergency and made a commitment to being a net carbon borough by 2030. The subsequent Climate Emergency Action Plan document states that the Council will help homeowners to make their homes more energy efficient. The application before you will enable this. We have provided additional information to you in order to address certain points within the Planning Officer's report, and I can confirm that the works relate purely to the rear elevation of the building. The nature of the works has been discussed at the residents' last few annual meetings, and all members have agreed and are committed to the works taking place. The works will be facilitated by the property management company and not be the responsibility of the individual flat owners. The intention is to install the replacement windows and doors in one go and not on a single flat-by-flat basis. And it is anticipated that, should planning permission be granted, the works would commence next year, subject to the final costings and manufacturer timescales. As set out in the submitted planning statement, there are a wide variety of window styles and materials within this part of the conservation area, and this contributes to its present-day character and appearance. The replacement windows and doors will be viewed alongside neighbouring properties where UPVC and aluminium are present, and will not, therefore, be an anomaly within the street scene, as the use of wood is not a consistent feature within the conservation area. The applicants have deliberately chosen a high-quality product as opposed to a more standard option, as they recognise the contribution that their homes make to the character of the area. I therefore ask you to grant planning permission and allow the residents to make their homes more energy efficient. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary, and I apologise for taking the speakers out of order. Okay, thank you both very much. Do we have any questions from members, first of all? Okay, any debate? Councillor Nelson, and then Councillor Seeker, and then Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is good because when we saw on planning view, we could see quite clearly the disrepair of the rear of the building at the moment. And as Councillor Tuck has very eloquently made the case, the public don't go past the back of the building. It's in a terrible state of repair. And the late email we had tonight with the photos of the current condition of the doors and windows in close-up, I think just emphasises that fact. And with the moves forward with PVC now, we've got PVC on ours. We're in an old Victorian terrace, and people think that the original windows, the quality of PVC now is such that really they look as good as the original, if not better. And we have to do what we can to have a sustainable future for the town. And I think this is an important step forward to show to the conservation people who don't want us to do this to heritage assets. We need to be pragmatic, we need to have common sense, and we need to do what's right for the residents to help them save money on their bills. So I will be supporting the move to permit, not refuse.
Thank you, Councillor Seacombe.
Thank you very much. It's a pity we haven't seen I know we've got some figures here. I haven't seen, unless I haven't looked hard enough on the actual design. You might expect me to be, with my traditional outlook on life, to be against the PVC. However, I do think that in this instance, both the councillor behind me, Councillor Nelson, and the Speaker, the other councillor over there, I think they're right. And as the building was only built, what is it, just under 20 years ago, I don't see any problem with putting the PVC windows in. So I will also be supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I can't support the recommendation. It's ridiculous. We have housing stock in this country that has some of the poorest insulation properties in the whole of Europe. And it is a significant cause of climate change. This is a step in the right direction. I'd like it to be triple glazed, but I'll settle for double. It's a no-brainer. I don't want to preempt anything anybody wants to say, but I would move to approve.
Thank you. We did see this on Planning View, and one of the concerns of officers was that if we approved this, it would then be a haphazard process of individuals putting windows in at certain times and some not putting windows in at all. And clearly that's not the case. We've had a letter from the agent as well as what's been explained to us now. So it's all going to be done in one go, all uniform. I absolutely will be supporting the application. Before we go to the vote, Councillor Wheeler.
Yes, I won't add too much to it, except that I do feel that whereas I'm very keen to keep the heritage of Cheltenham, the listed buildings, the conservation area and everything, I think we do have to be a little bit pragmatic about things. And when we've got applications for replacement of single glazed windows or air source heat pumps where they might just infringe a little bit, I think we have to be a little bit pragmatic, and we must be looking at these measures and be giving them a little bit more weight in favour of, against the weight in favour of casting our town in aspic and keeping everything as it was just because that what it was in previous. So I'll leave it at that, but I do think there needs to be a bit of a difference in our attitude to such measures.
Okay, thank you. So I think I have to take the recommendation first, which is to refuse. Did the officers want to come back on anything? Are you okay?
Before the next bit. Yeah. So do the vote first.
Okay. So all those in favour of refuse? No. All those against refuse? So that's unanimous. So we then vote on proposal to permit. Proposed by Councillor Fisher, was it? Seconded by Councillor Nelson. Do you want to speak first? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I think if committee are minded to grant permission, I think it would be sensible really to impose a condition requiring the submission of a timescale for works and a programme for works, so that the committee can be sure that those windows are all installed at the same time or at a similar time. As it stands at the moment, there's no control over that. So if committee are minded to grant permission, I would suggest a condition of that nature to be added.
Makes sense? All those happy with that? Yeah. Okay, so now, subject to that condition, those in favour of permit, please show. And that is unanimous, I think. Lovely, thank you all very much. Okay, I think this is the Ben Warren show tonight. Ben, we now have 61 Moorend Park Road, and that's over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the application relates to 61 Moorhen Park Road, a semi-detached property located within a residential area. Members will likely remember a similar application being considered at Planning Committee in June of this year, where permission was granted for a two-storey and single-storey rear extension. This revised application seeks consent for a change in the roof form of the single-storey element from a pitch to a flat roof. Construction works are well underway, so the application is retrospective. The application is at Planning Committee at the request of Councillor Nelson, who raises concerns regarding impact on neighbouring amenity. The Parish Council have also objected for the same reason. Some of this is the same presentation as before, but it paints the picture of where we're at. So existing site details here. The application site was not what it looks like now, but that's what it was before the first application was submitted. So the neighbour of concern is to the left there, so 59. So the elevations here, so the row at the top is as existing, so prior to any works. Below is what was previously approved at committee. And I've tried to do the two together here. So what was approved at committee at the top, what is now being sought consent. So I've just highlighted in the red circles the only change to be considered in this application. There was a minor change to the height of the doors in the ground floor in the rear elevation. And here is the photos which were taken whilst we were on planning view. So that is the flat roof to the height as per the drawings. So the key planning matters are design, impact on amenity and sustainability. Officers consider the amended roof form to be acceptable in terms of design and impact on neighbouring amenity. As such, officer recommendation is to permit the application subject to standard conditions that we would attach to a householder application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ben. Any questions? Councillor McCloskey, Councillor Wheeler, Councillor Fisher.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Possibly a question for the legal or head of planning, I think. The particular developer here is not a beginner. They're not amateurs. They are professional builders. They know full well that when you apply for planning application and you build what is permitted. They have recklessly moved on to the point where it's only because the neighbour has noticed that it's not to plan that the retrospective application has come in. I don't think we can particularly change this application, but can we put a condition into any future application that comes from this particular developer to say that you will stop work forthwith if you are minded not to do it according to the plan? Because there should be some recourse to stopping this happening in the future, because it's by no means the first time we've been in this situation.
Thank you. I'll let the officer respond on that. It's more of a general point than this particular application, but yes, I think we all share your concerns about that.
I just want to point out, so I know you're referring to the known developer. They are the planning agent for the application. They are not the developer. It is a private householder application. So yes, they are known for doing developments across Cheltenham. They are just the chosen agent. So I don't want you to make a decision or feel that you're making a decision based on reprimanding a developer, because they are simply the name attached to the plans. So what the applicant or owner then did after achieving a decision, I wouldn't say falls on the developer. I just wanted to make that point. I think Chris wants to expand.
So just picking up on a few points from a legal perspective, unfortunately, whilst obviously it's disappointing that developers do things like this, the council can't impose a condition or preempt breaches in that manner. The way that planning works is that you have to wait for a breach to happen and then take appropriate enforcement action after it's happened. The system doesn't allow you to preempt them and sort of give them a bit of a hit with a stick before something happens, if you like. So unfortunately, we can't impose anything as you suggest.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler, I think?
Yes, you'll have to excuse my ignorance. I'm trying to see exactly the difference between what is there. Now, you did show the plan. So that side section should be sloping up to the window. So in actual fact, although it's hardly a beautiful building, the extension, but there is less roof there than previously. Am I right in all that? You know, you've got a flat roof as opposed to the other one, which would have gone right up to the window. I'm just talking about the side piece. The rest is all the same, yeah? Oh.
Yeah, so the only change is the change from a pitch to a flat roof of the ground floor extension. What I think you need to bear in mind, and as set out in the report, that it's essentially lower at the height it attaches to the rear elevation, but is higher at the point at the eaves where it's furthest into the garden. So at the point furthest out here, it is higher by 0.35 metres. That is because of the makeup of a flat roof. There's a certain level that it would have to be. So it's not wholesale lower. It's lower at one end, slightly higher at the other end. So, okay.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Councillor Fisher.
Yeah, thank you. It doesn't, you know, I'm ex-engineering, and this isn't a particularly good drawing. But on what is approved, in that semi-pitch roof, it shows a roof light. Now, on the drawing, you wouldn't know if on the new application, you wouldn't know whether there's a window on there. Is there, or is it to be decided yet? You know, any resemblance to the drawing is purely accidental. It's an old engineering term.
There's not one shown to be projecting above the flat roof height. That doesn't mean to say there isn't one sunken into the roof or that one won't be put on. If it's put on, then we may be back here again if they then need to amend it. But as per the plans, there's nothing to be any higher than the flat roof that is there on site at the moment. There's no indication on the floor plans, although there isn't a roof plan as such, there wouldn't be a requirement for one. So based on the plans, there isn't one projecting above the flat roof.
Okay, any debate on this? Councillor Nelson?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just building on what Councillor McCloskey said. I think as a committee we should make a point of principle on this, because be it developer or agent or applicant, we do see this often, well, sometimes, when they get their plans approved and then they change them and do something different. Now, the difference between those two on the right, I'm glad you've left this up, the applicant has wanted to have more light coming into the back of the house, so they had to raise the height to get the bigger, taller windows, the nice bifold doors, which were much lower. So they're getting more light, but they're depriving their neighbour of the light by doing the solid brick wall, which was going to be sloping. So the amount of light coming into the neighbour, although it doesn't fail the light test, it is a loss of amenity in my personal view, and I think this loss of amenity in planning law is subjective, and that's why these sort of applications come to committee. Would you want to look out at that brick wall every morning, out of your window? That's all I'll say.
It's not quite finished yet, but you know, we did approve this. Having viewed it, we voted on it, had asked all the questions, and it's, you know, it's not much different to what we approved. No, the previous one. Yeah. Yeah. Councillor Fisher.
Yeah, Councillor Nelson raises his point. We all know, and we've had the cabinet member for planning say that he described it as planning creep. But we, as a planning authority, should be looking, and this is a question that our new head of planning and chair and legal officers should look at. When you apply, you pay a fee. When they reapply, that fee should be the same. It may be act as a deterrent. We fix our own charge, and as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, legal officer, planning should be self-funding. It shouldn't make a profit, it shouldn't make a loss. Now, we have a great difficulty in attracting planning officers to, as Chair has said many times, because of the cost, what they could earn in the private sector. If we charge a little more, if you're building a house that's going to cost you £1 million, whether the planning application costs you 300 quid or 600 quid is small beer. And we should be looking at that, and certainly coming back with changes should be deterred to an extent by costs. Get it right first time, because officers' time gets used time and time again, which is in short supply, and financially we should be self-supporting, which we don't appear to be.
I think we are straying off the application now. But planning fees haven't gone up for 5 years, but we hope they might be going up in due course. Is it on?
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify a point, planning fees are set nationally by regulation, so the Council doesn't have any authority to raise statutory fees, only discretionary fees on pre-applications and so on. So we are effectively stuck with the fees that the government prescribes. Having said that, the fees did go up last week for the first time in several years, so there has been a significant increase in planning fees. And also the free go. So, as many members will know, you used to get a free go, effectively, if you resubmitted your application within a year. That was also abolished last week. So any second application from now on, they would have to pay a full fee again.
There's good news on the way.
Thank you, Chair.
That is good news. Right, so the recommendation on this one is to permit. Those in favour, please show. Is it on the application?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Well, the question I was going to ask is, to be honest, although I think this looks ugly, it strikes me that the applicant has chosen a cheaper option, just to put a flat roof on, rather than what was a relatively attractive sloping roof. Is there any real argument we can use to refuse just for the shape of the roof, other than the fact that it's different from the original application?
Well, I think the planning considerations are set out in the report. So yes, it's the same considerations as any application, but I'd suggest that's limited to design. So whether you think a flat roof instead of a pitched roof is unacceptable, and also amenity. That's the only grounds that this would be unacceptable on. Amenity straying between loss of light, loss of outlet, overbearing impact, the normal considerations. But that is simply it. So you'd have to find a reason within those things to refuse it.
Just from a legal perspective, and just to bring it all back in a little bit, obviously the baseline is what's already permitted, so you're considering this proposal against what's already permitted, so you need to look at it in terms of whether what's now come before you today is more harmful than what's already there, essentially. So, and also just to point out that with retrospective applications, obviously the fact that it's retrospective is not relevant to you today. You're considering it before you as though it's a fresh application. So we just need to bear those in mind when reaching a determination.
Thank you. Okay, those in favour of permit, please show. Thank you. And those against? Okay, any abstentions? No. So that's permitted. Okay, thank you. And then we have appealed updates, which is just to note. We have no urgent items, so the meeting is closed and wish you all a very...
Can I just ask, I know the, the report for 131 and the tents said they've got 3 months in which to take them down. Do we know where we've got to with that? Because they're still there and people are still complaining. Can you enlighten whether it's too, whether you've been here long enough to understand it? I don't know.
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm that we're poised to serve an enforcement notice, but I'd have to look into the finer details and to give you a detailed update, and I can do that after the meeting.
Thank you all. Good. Have a good night.